Okay, so we hear the word data thrown around all the time, right? It can sound super complex, maybe even a little intimidating. But what if I told you that you could make sense of almost any data in the world just by asking two very simple questions? Let's dive in and find out. But first, let's get a quick reality check. When we think of data, we usually picture neat little spreadsheets. But the real world? It's not like that at all. A whopping 80% of all the data out there is what we call unstructured. It's the messy stuff. And that, right there, is the central problem we're all trying to solve. So that leads us right into our first big idea here, the data deluge. We're creating more information than ever before in human history. And honestly, most of it is just chaos. Okay, to really get this, imagine walking into a giant library. But instead of neat shelves, everything, and I mean everything, is just dumped in one colossal pile in the middle of the floor. You've got organized financial ledgers right next to handwritten letters, family photos, and old audio tapes. How in the world is anyone supposed to find anything in that mess? Well, that chaos, that's pretty much the world of data today. Yeah, it sounds totally overwhelming. But here's the thing. Just like a great librarian has a system, there's a way to bring order to all this chaos. And it really all boils down to asking a couple of very simple questions. And here they are. These are the two simple questions that unlock everything. First up, what does this stuff actually look like? That tells us its type. And second, where did it come from? That tells us its source. That's literally it. These two questions are a roadmap for that entire messy library.
All right, so let's dig into that first question. When we ask, what does data look like? What we're really getting at is its structure, how it's organized, or more often, how it isn't.
So on one side of the coin, you have structured data. This is the nice, neat, tidy stuff we all love. Back in our messy library, this is like the perfectly kept financial ledgers. Everything is in a predictable table with rows and columns, just like a spreadsheet. It's a dream to search and analyze. And then you've got the other side, unstructured data. This is basically everything else in that giant pile on the library floor. The photos, the social media posts, the emails, the audio files. There's no set format, which makes it way harder to work with. But here's the kicker. This is where most of the really valuable, juicy, real-world information is hiding. So if you put them side by side, the difference is pretty stark, right? Structured data is rigid, organized, and easy to search. Unstructured data is flexible and full of potential, but you need special tools like AI to make any sense of it. You can't just ask a photograph a question in the same way you can ask a database. Hey, show me all the sales from last Tuesday. Okay, so this table kind of sums it all up nicely. Now, you see we have our two main players, but there's this interesting middle ground too, semi-structured data. Think of things like JSON or XML files. They aren't in perfect tables, but they use tags and labels to give them some kind of organization. Sometimes this stuff gives you the best of both worlds. All right, so that's question one. We know what it looks like. Now for question number two. The other half of the puzzle is figuring out its origin story. Where did this data actually come from? So for starters, data can come from inside a company. This is internal data, like sales figures or employee records. And this stuff is usually pretty reliable because, you control it. Or it can come from the huge wide world out there, things like government data sets or social media trends. This is external data, and it gives you that all-important context about what's happening outside your own four walls. And there's another way to slice this. Who actually did the collecting? If you went out and collected it yourself for your specific project, say you ran a survey, well, that's a primary source. It's super accurate for your needs, but man, it can be time-consuming and expensive. But if you're using data that someone else already put together, like a public research paper, that's a secondary source. It's way faster and cheaper for sure, but you're also kind of placing your trust in how well they did their job. Okay, so where are data pros actually getting their hands on all this stuff in the real world? Well, the toolkit is massive. They're pulling from databases, using web scraping to gather info, tapping into social media feeds, and getting data from all kinds of sensors. And one of the most powerful tools in that kit is something you hear about all the time, the API. So, what on earth is an API really? The best way to think about it is like a menu at a restaurant. You don't have to go into the kitchen and learn how the chef works. You just look at the menu, tell the waiter what you want, and a few minutes later, that messenger, your waiter, brings back exactly what you ordered, no fuss. That's what an API does. It lets different computer programs talk to each other and exchange data in a really clean, simple, standardized way. And of course, we absolutely cannot forget about data that is constantly on the move. We're talking about real-time data streams. This is stuff being created and updated literally every single second. Think about stock market tickers, the GPS on your phone, or data coming from a smartwatch.
Okay, phew. So we've waded into our chaotic library and started sorting things out. We've asked what our data looks like and where it came from. So why do we even bother with all this? What's the big payoff at the end of the day?
This is where it all comes together. Here's why this is so critical. For example, if you know you're dealing with a mountain of unstructured text, you immediately know you need a certain kind of AI model to understand it. Or, if you know your data comes from a shaky secondary source, you know you've got to be extra careful about cleaning it up before you trust it. Getting this foundation right helps you avoid huge mistakes and lets you draw conclusions that are actually accurate and meaningful.
At the end of the day, it's all about building that strong foundation. As Data Foundations puts it, a strong foundation in these concepts ensures that data scientists can handle diverse data sets effectively and make accurate, meaningful conclusions. It really is all about starting with the basics.
So think about this. The next time you post a photo or send an email or even just check the map on your phone, just remember, you're creating data. And now you have the two simple questions you need to start making sense of not just that data, but any data. What does it look like, and where did it come from? Ask those two questions, and you might be amazed at the story your own data tells.